When it comes to indigenous history and beliefs, I am in no way an expert, especially when you start talking about creatures like the Wendigo. And as your resident white girl, that's the last time I'll be calling the antlered spirit by its name today. Don't worry though, I did consult my expert friends, so we shall have the good, true info. Question for you: what cryptid or mythological creature scares you the most? Let me know in the comments and let's chat about some sightings that I believe. So back in 2010, Indigenous elders in northwestern Ontario were calling a dead creature that washed up on the shores of their remote community a bad omen of things to come, and nobody seemed to be able to identify the waterlogged carcass from photos. Not that there was a lack of opinion on the matter. The photos went viral after an OG Cree community south of Hudson Bay released pictures of the rat-like creature that a dog had sniffed out from a local creek. Pictures posted to the website of the Big Trout Lake community showed a long and skinny creature with brown fur and a bald, pale face. The creature was about a foot long, according to the official community website, and was found when two nurses were hiking near a local creek. Their dog Sam saw something in the water and dragged the creature out. Daryl Senawap, a council member for Big Trout Lake, said he couldn't confirm stories by some community members, including his great uncle, about sightings of a strange animal roaming swampy areas and feeding on beavers. And he was like, okay, keep in mind, those stories were from about 60 years ago. He hadn't seen the creature himself, nor had his grandfather or most of the community. But he did say that this creature's appearance was being interpreted by some elders as a bad omen for the community. The community website stated that nobody knew what it was, but their ancestors used to call it the Ugly One. Rarely seen, but when seen, it's a bad omen. Something bad will happen according to the ancestors. Now, in Indigenous communities, they don't like to say the name of the creature that gives it power. Senawap said that one of the two nurses who aren't from the area described a foul odor emanating from the creature's carcass. The pair did not attempt to move the creature because they believed it was an animal common to the area, but they eventually realized that they had taken photos of an unfamiliar, possibly rare specimen. But when they returned to the rocky shoreline, it was gone, and their photos are the only evidence left of this mystery creature. Now, online commenters have suggested that the mystery creature could either be a waterlogged bear cub, an otter, a beaver, muskrat, possum, or any other rodent-like animal that may have been diseased or misshapen by decomposition. The experts know better though, and are pretty sure this was a flesh eater of the forest. We're not leaving Northern Ontario for this next reported sighting yet, just traveling over to Kenora. Look, I grew up in Northeastern Ontario, and there are a lot of Indigenous reserves up north, and they tend to know what's fact and what's fiction when it comes to this specific knowledge. A source who prefers to remain anonymous mentioned that she lived in a rural area, and her house was about 100 meters from a small stream that splits the small wooded lot in half. She was there one day, and all of a sudden she felt cold and uncomfortable, like she was being watched. She also became increasingly paranoid that somebody or something was out there with her, and decided to head inside since the sun was settling. Our narrator started walking towards her house, and as she approached the edge of the woods, she turned around and briefly saw a large creature about 80 yards from her standing across the stream. It then proceeded to take a step towards the woman, who panicked and ran out of those woods in about 5 seconds. She's described it as being the most she's ever been scared and the most adrenaline that she's ever felt running through her. In the brief period of time that she saw this thing, she could tell that it was pale white, tall, and humanoid. It's believed by Indigenous folks in her area that an antlered spirit will call to you for help like a human in order to lure people towards it. And what do you know? Our gal heard what sounded like a young girl calling out for help in those woods. So fast forward about a year later, after a heavy snowfall, she once again heard the calls of a girl coming from the woods. She looks out the window, doesn't see a thing. That night, the sounds continued off and on all night. Now the poor gal lives alone, but there is a couple that lived about a kilometer from her, and she ventured over to them a few days later to be like, hey, any advice? She asked them if they'd heard any sounds, and their eyes were like, aye. They were relieved that they weren't the only ones imagining the sounds. The husband told our witness that he saw a tall, pale white humanoid walking through the woods behind their house while he was out chopping wood. So she asked him what he thought it was, and he said it wasn't sure, but he remembered that his father would talk about the legend of the flesh eaters of the forest when he was a boy, and everything they know about this creature matched up with what was currently going on. Time to venture outside of Ontario, heck outside of Canada, for this sighting from Maine. Ian Harris wants to make it clear that throughout his youth and adulthood, he's had several encounters with entities and energies that are not of this realm. At least not as far as science and history is concerned. Poor guy is just a magnet for the quote-unquote unknown. Specifically speaking, over the last few years, he's had several terrifying experiences, which includes being stalked while taking late night walks around Turner, Maine. Sometimes he's overcome with a sense of fear that's animalistic, and an innate sense of paranoia consumes him, as if something is watching from the woods and that he needs to get to safety fast. On other occasions, he's had something, actually quite aggressively, follow alongside him, chasing him away from certain areas while whispering in a low, human-like tone. It sounds like human footsteps crunching across tree branches, leaves but so much larger, heavier than any human can step. This thing can also hurl itself from treetop to treetop, and the power of it is so great that it has actually knocked down trees. full-sized ones, as it leaps. Besides those encounters, he's visually seen something he can only describe as an antlered spirit. It was either comfortable enough with Ian's energy to reveal itself, or something else altogether. Maybe it wanted to eat him, maybe it wanted to possess him, maybe it just wanted to talk to him. He doesn't really know because he didn't stick around long enough to find out. I don't blame him. The energy of this thing, the way it looked, was just so offensive, so terrifying, that Ian only remained long enough to visualize what he instinctively knew was coming through the woods and was about to show itself to him. Ian was just frozen while he waited for this thing to come out of the woods. Looking back, he's not sure if it was curiosity or the power of the creature itself. So he locked eyes with this thing, and when he did, it was as if he was suddenly watching himself from its perspective. Horrified, he tore himself away and ran inside, locking the front door, hurrying to his bedroom before screaming for his housemate. Ian refused to even step out of his bedroom for the entire night, and was so terrified that he was shaking for hours and did not sleep. Some definite details he can remember of this creature was that its face was sunken in and its head was very large in size. Where its eyes should have been were craters of black, and in the middle, glowing orbs that were very bright and flame-like. Now this thing was all fours, but it definitely could have walked on 2 legs if it wanted to. The creature was also very, very thin, and its chest was very near skeletal, and the stomach was caved in as if it hadn't eaten in like 100 years. Its arms and legs were both very long, and they were insanely muscled and massive. Honestly, its arms and legs were the only part of the creature's anatomy that had any mass about it. The creature itself though was huge, possibly around 10 feet tall, and weighing in anywhere between 500 to 600 pounds. It also seemingly had fur covering some parts of its body, and along the tops of its arms, back, and thighs, but like, it also seemed kind of scarce at the same time. Another thing Ian remembered was the mouth. This thing was smiling at him. Its teeth were razor sharp and long, the size of its smile and teeth took up most of its face, and where a nose would have been, there were just nostrils, almost like a skull. Matches up with a lot of descriptions of the devourer. Just saying. Back to Canada we go with this next sighting, but over in Newfoundland this time. So Ed Davis lives on the northern east coast of Newfoundland here in Canada. There's an area extremely deep in the woods, about 40 minutes away from where he lives, that's so deep in the forest that you don't really see anything else, just lots of trees. There's a few smaller stores out that way, but nothing really noteworthy. But if you walk deep into the woods, there's a path that cars can't drive through, where a burnt up abandoned slaughterhouse is. Now this is where I mentioned that Ed had been warned by a visiting Algonquin friend not to venture into the woods because they had a reputation for being cursed, and that this friend was like, I'm never going there myself. But over one weekend, Ed and some other white buddies were bored and they were like, let's go check it out, we're in the area. And hey, nothing happened. They just took some pictures, observed that the area was a bit eerie. The days after they went to that place though, well, they'd been having bad and unexplainable events just occur randomly out of nowhere. I'm not shocked, and neither should anybody else be. So the next week, Ed and his buddies were like, hey, let's do this again. They got some other friends as well and drove back out there just to show them around to explore more and get better pictures. And when the group got there, they heard what they assumed was the wind howling. But the longer it went on, they realized the pattern didn't match up with the wind. It didn't make any sense for it to be howling like that, sounding almost as if someone was whistling at the group to get their attention. Now when the group was in one of the secondary buildings, a friend pointed out that it looked like something was running around outside the main building. And he was right. It looked like something very quickly moved across the front side of the building, and the sound was back, but louder. So the group went outside, crawled through a section of the gate to get to the main building, and as soon as they made it through, they heard a loud swinging sound, almost like a rusty door was slowly being opened and closed. So Ed and another friend were extremely put off by the sound, and they wanted to go back to the car. But the others said they wanted to go into the main building. So as the group was walking up to the front of said building, a friend jokingly made a remark about them splitting up, which, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. As he said it, the group heard a series of loud banging noises, like something was running across the metal floor of the building towards the door. So the group made it the heck out of there and ran back towards the trail. As they were running back towards the car, which wasn't exactly a short walk, they shined their lights back towards the buildings. And as the group looked back, they definitely saw what appeared to be some completely solid white bipedal humanoid running down the trail. They got back in the car, drove back to town as quickly as possible, and for everybody's sakes, I hope they never go back. And we're gonna end today with a sighting from Minnesota. Matt Daniels and his buddies had found the perfect set of hills to go skiing on one warm and wet day back in 1972, but sadly the day they found the location, the weather wasn't ideal, so they vowed to return another day. Luckily for the guys, later in the week, that perfect weather had arrived. They built some runs into the snow, and when Matt was at the top of the hill, he suddenly became aware of a black spruce tree that was about 40 feet from him. He couldn't quite figure it out at first, just that something looked kind of off. And just as he jumped down on his sled, he looked back again and started questioning what he was seeing. Black spruce only has one trunk, not 3. And those 2 extra trunks have fur on them. Well, hair. Really long hair. Long gray hair. What's got long gray hair? Is there some kind of snow pants with long hair or something? He's like, okay, Come on, irrational thoughts aside, somebody must be pranking me. So he looked up, he's like, okay, where's the adult, and no adults, just pine branches. What he saw matched a lot of descriptions we've already mentioned today about what the flesh eaters of the forest tend to look like, and that scared Matt so bad that he ran home and vowed to never explore those hills ever again. And that brings us to the end of our time. Once again, I've been Alexa, your resident ooky spooky girly, and if you enjoyed my ramblings today, could you help us out by giving this video a like, subscribing if you aren't already, hit the bell for more from us here at Top 5 Scary Videos, and I'll see y'all next time, you lovely spooky people.